Very exciting live. I am joined today by the lovely Anastasia from Anastasia Does Astrology, and we are going to be talking all about Pluto re-entering the sign of Aquarius and what this transit might mean for each of the Pluto generations. So I'm just
How
going to
exciting.
introduce you to Anastasia. Hello, Anastasia. How are you doing today? Are you excited about this transit?
Hi, Hannah. I am excited, a little bit nervous. I think the fact that we are both Pluto and Scorpio people, and the fact that there's going to be a bit more complicated energy coming towards us from Pluto and Aquarius. But I'm down for a challenge. So I'm excited. I'm happy to do this collaboration. Thank you for suggesting it too. And to introduce myself to Hannah's audience, I'm a traditional astrologer. I've been practicing for a few years. Found astrology, like, I guess I've always loved astrology, but I found it more so after my dad passed away, and so I dived in full speed. And so I'm practicing, creating content, and forever learning, always learning. What about you? What's your backstory for people who don't know you, maybe?
Yes, so I got into astrology in 2016, and I really stumbled upon it. It made its way into my life because I was traveling at the time, and I was feeling quite directionless. But finding astrology, I feel, has definitely opened my worldview. And yeah, so I have many videos all about astrology, and as do you, Anastasia. So we have a lot of content out there to share with people, which is good. So
Where were you traveling? Do you know? Because astrocartography tells you that there's certain lines. Was it at all connected to astrological lines on your chart?
yeah, 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 it was because it was a Saturn midheaven line. So it goes through California for me. And it was actually in California that I discovered astrology. So with the Saturn midheaven line, it kind of lines up with my sixth house energy. Saturn's there in the sixth with the sun and Mercury. And I've really turned astrology into a service. It's what I do now on a daily basis. So
Right.
yeah, it's quite interesting when you kind of look to the astrocartography, isn't it?
I'm always impressed with your work ethic, because I feel like whenever I see your stories, you're like, I just filmed 15 videos or something. And I guess my Virgo sun is she's a Virgo rising. She's working really hard at it. So I'm always inspired.
We love to work hard as Virgos too, but we also need the rest.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, you know that I caught COVID recently, so I'm sort of being well, there's a lot of work, but my body is telling me to relax a little bit more. So
Mhm, mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to first start to talk about, Pluto, like Pluto in Aquarius. What is Pluto? What is Aquarius? You were saying as well at the beginning, Anastasia, you've made plenty of videos about Pluto and Aquarius, so definitely everyone, watch those videos, become informed. And yeah, so in your view, in your terms, how do you see this transit?
Yeah, just a second. I'm trying to post on Instagram that we're live. Okay, just this is done. So Pluto is a very interesting planet, right? It's the planet of death and rebirth and regeneration. It's planet of power. It's the planet of empowerment, but also things that can destroy us a lot of times if we're not aware of them. They can sort of absorb and kill us if we're not working on them. Death is not always literal. Death can also be quite a lot of times metaphorical. So I think in a natal chart, Pluto holds important sort of key towards power and empowerment. And so Pluto moves very slowly. Pluto takes about, what is it, 260 years to move through the circle of the zodiac?
248, but yeah, pretty
240,
much.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it moves very slowly, and the aspects from Pluto are very significant. They take, I think in general, because it moves so slowly, the effects of it are slow, very slow burn. I see Pluto as initially making us face a lot of fears, which is what we're seeing with Aquarius. We started seeing it last year as well, in 2023, when we had a brief introduction of Pluto into Aquarius between March 23rd and June 11th. All the fears of Aquarian topics, fears of AI, fears of technology, I guess, which is also AI, like fears of social media and everything that is like kind of outside of our control. So fears, but then also like rapid development. So with Aquarius being the sign of the mind, being the sign of reinvention and sort of new ideas, kind of rapid development. I think I'm like pretty excited for that. I'm excited to see what the world will be like in the next 20 years, what kind of new developments might happen. I think there's always a bit of a fear, like I said, with Pluto and Aquarius, of like how it might affect our lives. Will there be privacy anymore, right? Like Pluto and Scorpio. I'm like, what about my privacy? I don't know how I feel about all of the like meta and all of those things. But yeah, so I'm excited. I guess I'm excited about the positive sort of like awareness of community, right? Like I'm excited for us to start to care about each other more, because it's the sign of friendship. It's the sign of like social sort of justice, and to see how the world will change with the new developments. What about you? What are you thinking?
Yes, I very much agree with everything you said there. And what also springs to mind is the relationship that we have with social media, and maybe because with social media it is so new, it's so fresh in our minds, and it's almost like Pluto and Aquarius is going to accelerate a lot of this, or maybe look to how we'll have to catch up, like for certain rules and regulations online, for instance, or having to reassess our attitudes with social media, and maybe having to kind of explore our unconscious, thinking, I kind of think of Pluto as the god of the underworld, and diving deeper into your unconscious to kind of maybe address any unhealthy ways of coping, or unhealthy ways of managing things. So maybe we'll see many things kind of come to the surface with respect to social media and technology as well. And I think as well, things will be uncovered. I really feel like Pluto is the one that exposes the truth. Like
For
Pluto
sure.
brings what is hidden to light. So we may see many truths coming to light within the collective, within humanity. And then I think as well about with Aquarius energy, it can be it can have many ideologies. And so maybe we'll see perhaps certain ideologies be exposed, or, cult mentality, or how people can sort of flock together. And also what I find interesting about Pluto is when Pluto was last in Aquarius, um, what unfolded there was the left versus right. But you think about the political landscape, left versus right.
Are you
That
talking about 2023 or like 18th century
So
Pluto?
18th century, yeah.
Century.
So basically, well, left versus right today, actually. But the thing to circle back to back then is, that was created when Pluto was in Aquarius last. So we could very well see this shift in this mentality, this very like black and white way of thinking. I kind of think of Saturn as kind of looking more toward the traditional themes, and then Uranus more so looking at the progressive side of it. So we
Right.
may see this kind of where do we sit within it all, and things are a lot more gray. And the reason, of course, just to say for people who don't know, Saturn and Uranus both rule Aquarius. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm kind of viewing it. There could be really like big collective mental shifts.
Idealism, I like. It's a good point what you said about like Aquarius being the sign of like ideas and idealistic, right? And like the Saturn element, that a lot of people in modern astrology sort of don't see Saturn as the ruler of Aquarius. Or sometimes people, like you said, sometimes people see two rulers of Aquarius, but I think Saturn is very strong in Aquarius, right? Regardless. And it's like people sometimes see, I think there is like the shadow is like being too overly idealistic about like technology and AI and like new developments and everything that can happen. Or even like looking back at 18th century, there was a lot of revolutions, right? But they were not painless revolutions. Sometimes like people forget that in order to make the changes happen, you also need to like be grounded and be slow and steady, which I think will be some of the lessons of Pluto and Aquarius, that we need to remember to also like stay present in our bodies and stay present with like sort of, like don't just go put your head in the clouds. Remember that you also need to like care about community and people that are close to you, not just like dream these visions. What do you feel like as an Aquarius yourself? Do you feel like, have you felt it last year when it went into Aquarius for a bit?
See, I have Black Moon Lilith in Aquarius at 2 degrees. With Pluto, I suppose the orbit's so big. I have Sun, Mercury, and Saturn as well in Aquarius, but the degrees of those planets are further along. But I do feel like even last year, what really came up for me was just to be cautious of burnout. With Pluto transits, I have Aquarius in the 6th house. So with health and everything, I had to really come to terms with burnout and come to terms with the workload and my work ethic and stuff like that. So I feel like maybe the technological advancements and things can help support that a bit. But then I always show a level of skepticism. I'm very heavy Saturn, very, very dominant Saturn in that way. I've got a lot of Capricorn energy. So I'm always like skeptical of things, because you're saying about the fears that could come up with all of these new devices and technologies. And I think, if anything, Pluto in Aquarius is going to say, question it all. Aquarians love to question. Aquarians love to question authority and push back against authority and stand up for like a cause or a movement or what they feel is really right. And then, I feel like that has been awakened within me a bit more. And maybe it will start to come out more and more. So it's exciting.
Sorry, it's also interesting that we had, we're not just getting Pluto in Aquarius, but we had like Jupiter and then we had Saturn in Aquarius for like 3 years since the start of the pandemic, already bringing up those questions of like, how do we deal with living online? How do we deal with sort of being separate from one another? How do we address fears around communication, around like community, all of the things with COVID too, right? Like, how do we deal with like this sort of something deadly in the air or some like virus that's in the air? How do we regulate things? So I think Aquarius Pluto will be important for that too, like changing the rules around COVID, because I know a lot of people are not very happy with the way things are right now, sort of the world going back to normal.
Yeah, we could see further division perhaps with Pluto going into Aquarius, or people really expressing their opinions and their views quite strongly.
I think it's going to be an interesting, like what's sort of interesting and hopeful for me, I think, to see is like outdated structures that were, and people in power that were sort of grasping and really holding on to power very tightly during Pluto and Capricorn. It's going to be interesting to see the power becoming maybe more spread out and sort of, like political systems. It's a little scary as well, because like there's no bloodless revolutions, but like it's going to be interesting to see some of those people maybe step away, especially like Pluto in Leo people, right? Which is might take us into Pluto and Leo.
Yes, right? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Yeah. So Pluto in Leo, of course, Pluto will oppose then this Pluto in Leo generation. And so Pluto was in Leo from 1937 until 1958. And this was the generation of the baby boomers. So there was a boom in the number of children. So 4.24 million new babies were added to the population every year between 1946 and 1964. And this is a generation then that is associated heavily with privilege. Okay, with privilege. There's actually so many reels I've noticed of how much cheaper housing was back then. But whenever you're a millennial or Gen Z, it's almost impossible to get a house because the cost of living is just ridiculous. But yes, so many born during this period, who grew up during this period, they and also who grew up during this period, sorry, they were born or a part of the Second World War. So it was really looking at like their contributions to society at that time and what was really sort of expected of them post, World War II. And many many significant figures, political figures, make up this generation or a part of this generation. We
Sure.
got we got Hillary Clinton, we got Joe Biden, we got Donald Trump, we've got Bernie Sanders. So all pretty old, older people, as you were saying earlier with the Pluto and Leo generation, the age, they're quite old. So we're going to notice then, of course, that these individuals are they're gonna start to die whilst Pluto is in Aquarius, and so that could very well suggest that the certain structures or systems or ways of doing things, that they're going to be transformed, okay, because there's going to be like some significant shifts and changes within the political landscape. But then I also kind of think of Pluto as legacy. It's what we kind of leave behind, and so we could very well see, certain children of these individuals, certain children from Pluto and Leo, and maybe what they go on to contribute. So it's not so black and white, I suppose you could say. These things could change in different ways. And then also kind of think of how these people, they transformed politics in the USA. We think about like drama, theatrics with Leo,
Yeah.
the performance, putting on a show. There's a lot of drama. I'm pretty sure, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton both have Mars in Leo. And that was an interesting kind of like battle, if you will, way back when, I think 2016, when they went up, or maybe it was before that. But yeah,
Well, yeah, it would have been like 8 years at this point because the another election is coming up in 2024. So 2016 sounds right.
yeah. So I think Pluto entering Aquarius, we could very well see this kind of more of either like a forward movement then. So it's like, okay, well, this is the new path, right? This is the new way. Those ways of doing things, that they're gone, they're outdated, they're buried, this type of stuff. But because of course with oppositions, we look at resistance, we look at opposing forces, and there can be a struggle and tension. But the other thing I kind of noticed with this is, if we think about how there was a baby boom, we're seeing that more people are they're actually choosing to be child free, or we're also noticing many people are childless because it's difficult for them to conceive. So we could see more people, I suppose, really choosing not to kind of live that more, I suppose, traditional lifestyle, a lot of that stuff. And I feel as if Pluto still being in Capricorn at the very end, we are seeing this these shifts to do with what is traditional.
It's so interesting. Sorry to just jump in, but like
Okay.
I find wherever Aquarius is in natal charts, you tend to have like a little bit more resistance and tend to be like really rational about things. And for me, it's my fifth house of children. And like I always look at people and I appreciate people who want to have kids and like obsessed with having children and see it as their purpose. But for me, it's always Aquarian. It's always like, but is this really necessary? But like, I'm sort of like, but it's such a commitment. It's such a sacrifice. Like I think, I'm always like, yeah, but it's a big duty. I don't see it as like glamorized sort of version of things. For you, it's Capricorn. Do you feel a little bit that way too? Or, I mean, you also have Venus in there, so it might be different.
Yeah, I think if anything, a part of me, I can be somewhat traditional in that way with my Capricorn energy, but I also, okay, maybe it's a little bit too personal to go in the kind of child stuff for that one. But too
We don't have
personal.
to. Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good. But I just kind of, just to continue, sorry, with the Pluto and Leo generation. So I think with Pluto in Aquarius, we could see, more people rising up, basically, uprisings, retaliation, as you were rightfully saying, of course, with Aquarius energy, there can be a resistance. So yeah, retaliation in that way. And the USA elections are going to come up this year, and there's apparently like loads of elections happening this year. Apparently 2024 is big for elections like all across the world. So we may just see more of these big political shifts. But yeah, and to kind of circle it back to Pluto in Leo, it could be this whole thing, because I kind of think of Leo at times as whenever Leo doesn't get its way, it can sulk. It can be quite sulky, kind of similar to Cancer. So if things do not go according to the ways in which this generation are satisfied with, there could be some sort of sulking. But then again, because they're sort of on their way out, maybe there isn't so much for them to be concerned about either. It's just sort of like, do you know what? I'm good. I'm gonna die happy. Maybe many of them are like, I'm dying happy. This is my legacy, and this is what I'm leaving behind. And they don't need to worry as much, maybe, if there are extreme situations that happen whilst Pluto is in Aquarius.
I'm like Vladimir Putin also has Pluto in Leo, and during Pluto in Capricorn, he's definitely been like grabbing onto power with all of his might. It's crazy, like how in Russia the term of the president used to be the same. It used to be like 2 4-year terms and then goodbye. And like, actually, no, I think it was like 2 4-year terms, and then you can come back after another term. So he basically like put on another guy who was his figurehead, and then he came back and he changed it to 6 years, and then everything that's happening with Crimea, obviously. So to me, it's going to be interesting to see, and I'm kind of hopeful about it. Like Pluto and Aquarius, hopefully, like bringing some kind of change, because like it's not great the way things are in Russia, I think, in terms of his control and power.
Mm-hmm.
I like, if or did you want to say more things? I was wondering.
No, that's I've said about with Pluto and Leo. I'm obviously like I'm interested to see if you have. Actually, no, sorry, I do. I have something else. I just realized I have something. It's actually an interesting thing. Okay, I think. So when Pluto was in Leo, it was the golden age of comics. Okay, so we had Batman came out in 1939. We had Wonder Woman come out. yeah. Superheroes in 1941, right? You think about Leo like being the hero, right? But so Marvel folded into Disney's larger business units in 2023. But there were disagreements about the changes, and there have been disagreements about these changes. And of course, I'm pretty sure that Marvel was sold to Disney in like 2012, or maybe earlier than that, or whatever. But then also you see with Star Wars being sold to Disney. But my view on this is with Pluto and Aquarius, we're noticing like a lot of people kind of thinking that you're taking the original was great as it is kind of thing, and you're redoing it, and there can be backlash on that. But there can also be, of course, a lot of people saying it's more inclusive, and there's new ways of telling the story, this type of stuff. But yeah, I find that interesting about with the golden age of comics, and then also the Hollywood golden age was when Pluto was in Leo as well. But the whole point I'm trying to get to is there's just a different feel to movies and entertainment today, because it's very much just like streaming service, Netflix. Not as many people are going, to the movies, to the cinema as much, and as I say, what I've kind of observed online is just a lot of back and forth, people disagreeing over how things are done in that way when it comes to show business and all these Leo themes, basically.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think we're already seeing that. We see the rise of influencers, the way sort of, back in the day during like Hollywood golden age, you just had a few, like select few of those gilded characters that everybody knew about and admired. And right now it's all, you can make yourself famous. You can go on social media, people do TikTok dances and all of that kind of stuff. Like there's like the dynamic of like who's in power is changing, and the power is getting so spread out too, right? Like celebrities getting like really spread out. You can follow people on YouTube, you can follow people on TikTok and sort of check in with them. and anyone has the power to like to be famous. And so I think that's also probably going to feel like tense for them or frustrating perhaps to give up some of that power. And I feel like, I feel like the opposition could also feel like there is a lot of things going on, like things that they're not familiar with. So like all of the technological achievements, like what is that? Is Meta the one where we live online, or what's the one, Meta?
I don't know. I'm not
But
sure.
like the world sort of like Google Glasses and all of that, and like AI and everything that's happening can feel for baby boomers, can feel like foreign language and can feel like they're sort of being pushed out. So I think people who like of the generation who have not retired yet will probably metaverse. Okay, thank you. People can sort of start like retiring more, and maybe, maybe the way I think like the better way to handle it is like trying to still use your gifts and something that you think makes you special, because as Pluto and Leo, you probably see your gifts and your talents and maybe share that with community, but like also kind of like learning to go with times, and maybe sometimes choosing to not go with times, right? Like if you want to stay close with your friends, then like organize book parties or tea parties or something. You don't have to like start moving into like AI living or anything like that. So yeah.
Interesting.
I think they will feel it, like they will feel it quite strongly. And I think like us Pluto and Scorpio millennials will feel this quite strongly as well, which we'll get to in a second. But it's a big one. And like, we were talking about that Pluto moves very slowly. So some of us will never get Pluto opposition. Like many of us will never get, like, I think Pluto and Scorpio people will not get Pluto opposition. It's just because of how quick Pluto was moving through other signs. Pluto and Leo generation does get it. So should we talk about Pluto and Virgo?
Yes, Pluto and Virgo. Let's move on.
So Pluto in Virgo is considered to be early generation X. The timing for that is between 1956 through 1972. Pluto in Virgo generation was a lot more health focused, a lot more sort of routine focused and everyday life oriented. They're considered people who are sort of more practical, more modest, more aware, I think, of the environment. That was also like around the time when people became like kind of more aware of like taking care of the earth and sort of like becoming more aware. I think there were books like Silent Spring by Rachel Carson and The Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich around that time, which sort of talked about ecological devastation and sort of like the use of certain pesticides, the use of certain like unhealthy things for the environment. So that was around the time. And people who have Pluto and Virgo, I think they tend to be very environmentally friendly or very like aware of the effect that we might have on the world. Around that time, there was also a lot of sort of developments in terms of like Virgo is very analytical. Virgo is like about the numbers. It's very sort of pays a lot of attention to details. So people born with Pluto and Virgo seen the development of pocket calculator, the first ATM, the programming language was sort of going through major development. Like there were first prototypes of the internet, the first email was sent. So like a lot of sort of developments together with medical developments, right? Like Virgo health, body, mind, kind of uniting that together, helping you carry a tiny piece of equipment in your pocket. So what's interesting with Pluto and Virgo generation is they're coming out of the Pluto trine. They just had Pluto and Capricorn was trining their Pluto. And Pluto trine tends to be a really nice transit, a really supportive transit. It could be like encouraging of them understanding how to use their gifts, right? Like how to use that service mentality, how to use that health-oriented mentality in a way to be structured with Pluto and Capricorn, how to build on your legacy, how to like sort of explore your gifts and talents and create a business out of it, or or like apply yourself in a different way. So I think the Pluto and Capricorn period between 2008 and right now 2023 2024 could have been highly beneficial period for them. And if you have, you know, have Pluto and Virgo, let us know, have you accomplished new things? Have you discovered, you know, yourself and your calling? And so Pluto going into Aquarius for Virgo, it's interesting because I used to study with Sam Reynolds, and he talked about Aquarius as a winter Virgo. Have you ever heard that? Have you heard about Aquarius? Yeah, he sort of compared them because both are like very analytical and both are very intellectual, but Aquarius maybe has an element of like a bit more detachment because it's happening in winter and there's no time to like worry about little things.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
So I think the connection between Virgo and Aquarius lies in information and sort of like analytical mindset. So I think in that regard, Pluto and Aquarius could be supportive in terms of learning new skills, learning how to use new technology to do the things that you're comfortable with. It could be a bit, I think, like it will require some adjustment. It's not like the easiest transit for Pluto and Virgo individuals because there might be like too many things going on, too many like new techniques, too many sort of focus on community and like a lot of different information. So I would encourage people born with Pluto and Virgo to like use their analytical mind to narrow things down, to not get like too overwhelmed by everything that's going on. And to remember to stay grounded, right? Like you and I, we both have strong Virgo placements. For many people who are watching us have strong Virgo placements. Like it's so easy to get sometimes like overwhelmed by like things, even by your busy mind. So like as much as possible, getting back into your body, having like spiritual practices, having quiet time, like narrowing things down, which is something you guys are so good at, could be helpful. And yeah, like, you know, kind of there is this saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Keep working on the things that you are good at and keep focusing on like service, and maybe, you know, don't overwhelm yourself with a big picture immediately. Just keep doing the good. Like I think, you know, like I feel like with Pluto and Aquarius we might focus so much on like the society and the community and everyone else, but like I think if you help one person, if you invest into like making the life of one person better, it can help the world quite tremendously, because then they go on and do great things.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah. So, yeah, I really, I love everything you just said there. It's like, wow, just nodding along. I was learning so much. But yeah, and even just to sort of add to that, with Pluto in Virgo, I also kind of see this as a generation of like the, you know, being perfectionistic in that way, you know, being perfectionist, yes, orderly, organized. But there was the whole thing of keeping up with the Joneses. I feel like Pluto and Virgo kind of fit in with Generation Jones or the Lost Generation, and the whole keeping up with the Joneses was like, you need to get the perfect house and the perfect car and the perfect marriage, and everything needs to be perfect. And I so agree with what you just said there. And I really love the way you put it as well, Anastasia, you know, with the Pluto in Capricorn transit from 2011 up until now. You know, many Pluto and Virgo individuals sort of rediscovering, if you will, or transforming their attitudes toward career, purpose, vocation, you know, their life's path, and maybe a lot of like breaking down of these beliefs, you know, these beliefs about perfectionism and stuff like this, and having a more healthier sort of outlook in this way, more well-rounded, I suppose you could say. But I think with Pluto in Aquarius, then for these individuals, maybe it could be quite contradictory, you know, because Aquarius energy can be quite contradicting and hypocritical. And kind of what I mean by this is, for example, you know, with Bill Gates. So Bill Gates, I think he's part of this, or no, he grew up during this generation. Bill Gates, he grew up during this generation, and then Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are both part of this generation. So you kind of, you know, look at these people in power, these more powerful positions, But with Pluto entering Aquarius, there could be a lot of these major shifts. Of course, we know we've been talking about this within humanity, maybe about human rights and stuff like this. So it's almost sort of like these individuals, who are you to kind of tell us, the common folk, how to live and how to spend our time and our money and our resources and stuff like this. So there could be a little bit of this more of a questioning of like really seeing what is the truth in this, what are the facts, what are the details, what information is accurate here. So in that way, yeah, the Pluto in Aquarius generation could perhaps usher more of this in, but then also maybe assessing this pressure to be important and to be successful and what success actually means. Because I think when Pluto was in Virgo at that time, there were rise and falls when it came to unemployment, the unemployment rates, with inflation and recessions. And then there were many workforce acts which were established, and the whole, workaholic, this coin, I think, was termed back
That's
then.
a Virgo thing. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
definitely. So yeah, I feel like Pluto in Aquarius, I think, is going to kind of help question, basically, what does it mean to be successful, or why do you feel like you need why is your worth so tied to your work, and the whole keeping up with the Joneses stuff? What does it mean, like, to have a perfect house and a perfect car? It's a lot of it will be about stripping it back a little bit, and many people within this generation just questioning these areas.
Right. I know someone who has Pluto and Virgo, and we actually have the same nodes. We're like 19 years apart. And she just started a YouTube channel, which I think is also very like Pluto and Aquarius, right? Like using technology to your advantage. And the first video she posted, she like talked about, this is my wisdom, this is my knowledge that I have gathered throughout my life. So I think a lot of times, like when you go through Pluto trine, with Pluto being in Capricorn, you can really come to understand your true gifts and talents and your true wisdom, and so then bringing that to the world. But I also like what you're saying about like questioning things and understanding that like Aquarius breaks away from convention. Aquarius kind of creates its own rules, right? So you don't have to, like you said, you don't have to follow what the world thinks perfect is. You are perfect as is, right? And just figure it out for yourself. Don't worry about what other people will say.
Yeah. So do you have anything else you want to add on Pluto in Virgo?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, so Pluto in Libra. So Pluto was in Libra from 1971, my mistake, until 1984. So this is Generation X. And what we noticed with this generation were the real rise and falls when it came to the divorce rates. In the UK, the Divorce Reform Act was signed just before Pluto entered Libra. And so this meant then essentially that unhappy couples could divorce. And in 1972, the Equal Rights Amendment was passed in the USA. I really I think about Libra as well through a lens of equality and fairness. Kind of similar to Aquarius in that way, but of course they just go about it in very different ways. And we also notice with this generation, this is a generation that really seeks a healthy work-life balance. And with Pluto then re-entering Aquarius here, perhaps such a balanced lifestyle could be supported by technological changes, like hybrid working, remote working. Maybe certain laws as well will change, certain laws regarding this work-life balance. And also the business conditions when Pluto was in Libra apparently was terrible. I mean, there was the great inflation from the 1960s to the 1980s, which, there was a lot of funding that went to the Vietnam War, and there's still funding that goes to wars today. So with that came, a lot of unresolved trauma. I also think about Pluto as like, looking at our unresolved trauma. So perhaps there was a lot of unresolved trauma from this generation. And I kind of see Pluto in Aquarius welcoming in major changes to do with mental health as well. You know, people being able to like more so seek help, or maybe there'll be more discoveries or other discoveries to do with psychology, for instance, or you know how things could develop there. So perhaps this is a generation that could very well, in a way, benefit, if you will, from these new practices and developments. Of course, this is going to be this trine energy between the Pluto generations. And at the same time, with Pluto in Aquarius, we're noticing that, you know, more people choosing to actually be single, for instance. And there's different types of relationships today. You know, it's not just you know, traditional in that way, back, you know, as it was back then, or what it was kind of seen to be the right way back then. It's more today. It's like, no, there's so much more variety, and you know, people express themselves so much differently. So yeah, we could see perhaps more people just being more accepting of these things. And what else I have? The other thing I just want to say then, with the trine energy to support it, would be grit and friendship support. Seeing that there is strength found in numbers. I feel like for the Pluto and Libra generation, this could be quite an opportunity for them to socialize more, to get out more, to kind of find different communities and clubs. And this is, yeah, I feel like this is going to really support them and assist them, and maybe even on a business level too, you know, because I feel like Libra is also great at business relationships. So we could maybe see more individuals from the Pluto and Libra generation working together in these healthier business relationships, and then networking and expanding themselves in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I think Pluto and Libra generation will thrive with this, because Aquarius is a sister sign. Like, I like that, like what you said about like groups and finding their community, finding people that they belong with, and sort of feel seen by, exploring new technology. So everything that you said. I looked at some historical examples. So from last time, Pluto was when Pluto was in Aquarius between 1777 and 1799, I think, or something like that. Yeah, 1798, 1777 to 1798. And they, you know, Pluto and Libra people did quite well around that time. So James Cook was the first European to land on the Hawaiian Islands. We're not going to mention that he got killed shortly after, which I'm doing. I mean, you know, the experience, he sort of walked right into some drama and was responsible for his own death, I think. But like he was like the first like European to discover Hawaiian Islands. Two really big Pluto and Libra individuals were George Washington and John Adams at the time. So George Washington became the first president of the United States. So that was between 1789 and 1797. He served as the president of the US. And the fact that he relinquished power in 1797 and gave it to John Adams, you know, not gave to him, but he was like inaugurated, was the first, or like one of the early examples of like giving power without fighting, and sort of just like, you know, letting go of the of control and trying to sort of grasp onto power, which is something that was a lot more, or is a lot more historic before then, and also happens a lot when Pluto is in Capricorn. So we might see, I think in the US it's going to be interesting with like everything you mentioned with Pluto and Leo, and a lot of like, you know, the current two presidential candidates both have Pluto and Leo. And I was watching, I think, the Astrology podcast, and Austin Koppock was talking about Uranus in Gemini, which is coming up in a couple of years, and how there's like historic precedent of Uranus and Gemini bringing like really strong leaders in the US history. So I guess we're going to see, I guess George Washington would have been, I believe, one of the Uranus in Gemini presidents. I might be wrong on that. There was also like quite nice music and literature developments, which is Pluto and Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus, right? Beauty, creativity, art. So I think part of the way you can use technology and you can use what's happening in the world is to like express your artistic talents. So like Surprise Symphony was written by Haydn around that time, who is also Pluto and Libra individual. And I think some, yeah, like there was also The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe published, which became her most successful novel. But she was born with Pluto in Capricorn, actually. So, but still like kind of important developments, I think, creatively, which I think Pluto and Libra can jump on.
Oh, love that. Yeah.
So yeah, like I told you before we started talking, it was fun to go down and see who was like domineering the last Pluto and Aquarius period, what were their Pluto signs. So there was a lot of Pluto and Libra people, Pluto and Scorpio, and Pluto and Sag characters.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So, is there anything else about Pluto and Libra? Do you want to move on to Pluto and Scorpio?
I think we can do Pluto and Scorpio, unless you have more things to say.
No. Oh, all good. All good.
So Pluto and Scorpio is, I think, going to be one of the more people that are watching us, right? Because we're moving in towards the millennials at this point, and that was Pluto between 1984 and 1995. So Scorpio is a deep, intense, passionate sign. So some people believe that Pluto and Scorpio generation is here to play the game at a higher level, that we're sort of meant to go through more transformations in life and to be reborn time and time again. It was interesting because like Pluto was in Scorpio when there was a lot of fascination with like the topics of serial killers, when there was an AIDS epidemic. So there was a lot of like awareness and change around sex and around like the kind of fascination with murder as well, right? It's I think a generation that grew up with like Harry Potter as our sort of, buddy. We like watched a lot of Harry Potter. We read a lot of Harry Potter. There were like horror series like Goosebumps. Tim Burton kind of rose to prominence and like is quite adored by a lot of millennials. So like, his movies were kind of a big hit. Tattoos became sort of prominent, and people started to, change their body, transforming their body in quite literal way, and sort of embracing that into the bringing that into the workplace. Of course, there were some challenges around that time, right? Like we lived through 9/11. Mass shootings became quite common around that time, and people sort of had to see death on a larger scale and sort of kind of become familiar with that. There were talks about nuclear war. So I think millennials have definitely come into the world already at like a more complicated stage in life, right? Like it's very different from the Leo generation when they had more money and the prices were sort of affordable and they could buy houses. We are in this place of like, even the fact that I think millennials entered workforce in late 2000s, and that was right around the time of the financial crisis. So another death and rebirth type situation. So quite an interesting generation we are, I think. So right now we are on the verge of the Pluto square, which is something that starts around late 30s. And it's kind of a tense period. It's a period that you will have to deal with your inner, I think, need, like Pluto and Aquarius are both fixed signs. So they're not interested in like being adaptable, right? We're sort of like, we know what we want, we know what we like. So there might be a little bit of that need to deal with tension and to make some tough decisions. I think some of the topics that I see coming up is privacy. And like, what I mentioned too, we sort of On some level, like, we are the generation that shares a lot about our feelings, right? We do kind of share a lot. Like, we talk about our mental state and our emotions, and it's also a generation that sort of came to it during, I mean, Gen Z maybe a little bit more, but I think social media and Facebook is part of millennial generation. So there is a tendency to share a lot, but I think the way the world is going to transform will be a bit at odds with what we're used to, or like the control that we used to have over what we share, right? I think what I see a lot of times on social media is like people maybe sharing highlights, or like kind of having, yeah, like their happier experiences. So I wonder if Aquarius will level the playing field and say that its life is so much more complicated than that, which we are quite familiar with, I think, already. But yeah, like wherever Aquarius is in your natal chart, I think will bring like new information, new passions, new ways of doing things that will somehow be at odds with your natal desires. Will encourage you perhaps to adapt to some changes, and the choices that we will make, Pluto in Scorpio generation in the next 20 years will be quite significant, I think, and will be sort of life-changing in a lot of ways. It's a very, I think, like Pluto in Scorpio is very like all or nothing energy, and Pluto in Aquarius is a bit more detached. So some of the things that we're going to have to learn is to maybe separate from our own intense emotions and like focus on the world at large, so that we can be a bit more rational to make the changes happen. I think those are, I mean, it's like the invitation is to try not to be as resistant to what's happening, because it might be uncomfortable, but like the more you're able to like adapt, the better. I think the easier it's going to be. What do you think, my Pluto and Scorpio friend?
Oh yeah, I agree with pretty much like everything there, Anastasia. Yeah, being part of this generation as well. What really stood out to me on a personal level was the resistance to the changes, and the being concerned about privacy and what's being shared online. And it is kind of interesting to think that the millennial, us as millennials, we kind of ushered in this kind of usage of the internet more so. But then I suppose Gen Z, they kind of took it and then they just
Ran with it.
we'll get with it. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of think of Pluto and Scorpio generation sort of being the ones who we look back more at our old sort of habits and what we did with Facebook, for example. We're like, I cannot believe I shared that, because it was all so new, and I suppose, as being so young as well
But
and
we
so
know
fresh to it
both.
all.
Sorry, but like we know
Sorry.
both, right? Like we remember life before it was on social media. Like Gen Z probably doesn't remember life before it was on social media. We remember what it's like to
Yeah.
play in the, like, I don't know, for your parents to not be able to get in touch with you. And right now your parents know where you are because there's a pin that's on your phone.
Yeah.
So we are this like transitional generation in a lot of ways.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We do. We have the kind of the good old days with that. Because I remember what it was like, without the internet, and it was completely fine. But that what stood out to me with this is, so with Jeffrey, I don't really want to say his full name just in case, but Jeffrey Ebb. Basically, it was him then that purchased that island during, well, it was in 1998, which, Pluto was in Sagittarius at the time. But still, the acts that he performed and the way that he treated other people very disrespectfully, we're seeing here, with this list that is being shown to the world at the minute. And I feel like that could perhaps, result in a snowball effect, kind of thinking about whistleblowers, for example. We may see more whistleblowers, and I kind of think is that Pluto and Aquarius generation will come along and say, hey, this is all of the crap. Basically, this is all of the horrible things, the horrible acts that happen, and it's exposing such behaviors as well. And maybe because with Pluto and Aquarius, what I kind of see is this constant surveillance. There's going to be more like data breaches, cyber attacks, more online stalking could be like a big issue. So, the resistance of it, I do agree with the Pluto and Scorpio generation, but then at the same time, I'd also look at it in another way, in that resistance can also be useful because it can help us like challenge, what isn't so positive as well. And maybe the Pluto and Scorpio generation as millennials, um, we can maybe push back a little bit against certain ways of doing things that aren't actually in the benefit of all, because though, with Scorpio energy, it's so instinctive, and there's a strong gut reaction. I know with Scorpios in my life, when they have a gut reaction about someone or something, oh my gosh, it's crazy how much it's all like it's true, it's on point.
Right.
So maybe the Pluto and Scorpio generation, it could also highlight that, my gut reaction here, something's actually not right now. And I don't mean to go so like dark with it, but then again, that's what Pluto and Scorpio is known for doing.
Right. Look at the colors we're wearing, like we're representing.
Yeah. So things could also turn in quite negative ways. But Pluto, the millennials, I feel, are going to be the ones who they're going to want to defend and protect.
Yeah. And an example, I think, was it last year when all of these images were created using AI, but they were actually using the images of like real people, artists, and questions around that, right? Like, how much is AI or everything that's happening, how is it going to affect our jobs? How is it going to affect our life and like things that we depend on, right? Things that are solid in our life right now. I think like that's what that fixed sign is. We have these things that are solid and tangible: relationships, comfort, like jobs, and AI will modify that. Some of the jobs will probably disappear, right? Some like questions around rights will need to be addressed. So that's where the discomfort comes, because we're like, well, we already worked hard to achieve this, and now you're saying that AI will do my job. What about me? So I think that's where like a need to adapt, a need to find a different field for yourself might come. What's interesting is in 1783, last time Pluto was in Aquarius, there were some like really successful Pluto people. I mean, I don't have a whole ton of examples, but there was like the Peruvian, I guess, revolutionary named Tupac Amaru II. And he was the one who led the indigenous rebellion against Spanish colonization. And I'm pretty sure they won. And another example of two Scorpio Pluto brothers kind of running and taking advantage of Pluto and Aquarius, they invented the hot air balloon. How Pluto and Aquarius is it, right? We're going to take our privacy and we'll bring it up in the air.
And it's fixed in the air.
Yeah, nobody can find me there. I can really do my own thing there.
Oh, I love that. That's so interesting. Okay, so have you got anything else you want to share about Pluto in Scorpio generation?
I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to Pluto in Sagittarius. All you Gen Zs, you're most likely majority watching this right now. Pluto was in Sagittarius from 1995 until 2008. So as you were also saying there, of course, Anastasia, from a young age, technology and social media fundamentally shaped their behavior. And as well, reaching for the next best thing. You were also saying about with TikTok, for example, and the whole, with fame associated with that. And I think YouTube came about in 2005 and Facebook came about in 2004. And YouTube, here we are using YouTube in order to present knowledge, to share information, which so Sagittarius, Sagittarius is the bringer of knowledge, the seeker of knowledge.
And connect two countries. I'm in the US, you're in the UK, how Sagittarian too.
Yes, exactly. And I think as well then, because this is a sextile, so another sort of more assisting, benefiting, encouraging aspect, we're going to notice, more people from Gen Z being just open to these technological changes. But the thing, or the slight issue with this generation, I find, is their lack of focus, is their lack of concentration. This generation, and I'm not coming for you, Gen Z, I'm really not, but you are known for being kind of lazy. Okay, there's the whole thing, and taking things for granted could also very well be a part of this. But the thing that circle us back to Sagittarius, Sagittarius can lack focus at times. Sagittarius can sort of be lazy at times, but there's still the passion. I mean, this is a generation full of passion, full of inspiration. That, like, they're the ones who will inspire you through their message. And I think as well, this is the generation that kind of was like, no, I'm going to be open. I'm going to share. I want to share this knowledge. I want to share this information with the world, and be so honest about it, to be so raw, be honest about it, and to even just talk so openly about their raw emotions and their fears and stuff like this. And then at the same time, there's always comedy in it. Like, there's, you think, like, memes and reels, and it's sort of like, ha ha ha, I'm in therapy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's humor to it. There's like a lightheartedness, I suppose you could say. So I feel as if Pluto entering Aquarius, this could suggest that this is a generation that will like take to it so well, like a duck to water. It's just like, right, okay, what do I need to learn? Okay, I'm going to learn this new device, going to learn whatever it is, and just run with it. And they could also possibly be more, because I also think about Sagittarius as, being tied to our morals and our code of ethics. So, thinking about the environment, for example, thinking about human rights, for example, they could be the ones who are, really leading the front line, starting certain movements and causes and wanting to make the world a better place. And yeah, they're going to be full of so much passion, especially if they believe believe in it. Even with their religious views as well. If they are religious, or if they have certain beliefs that they stay true to and they live their life according to. I feel like Pluto and Aquarius could also add greater opinion, more opinions, maybe more idealistic as well, because both signs can be quite idealistic.
Yeah.
So I feel like there is a lot of strength in this. There's a lot of optimism and hope, and they could very well really help shape the future generations to come in this way. But it's also a little bit of, as you were sort of highlighting earlier, too much idealism, just too much out there, and also very like, oh, this is the big vision and this is the picture, but it's like, how are you actually going to make that happen? Right. Realistically speaking.
Right. You're like, I'm booking the flight for the next country to help them cure whatever, but like, what about your family that needs you, right? Or your parents that depend on your spouse or something that needs you to have an important conversation. You're just like, no, it's not about this. It's about this high vision. So yeah, just make sure you're not escaping too much. Some of the historic examples, there were definitely people, even with the Cook, what's his name, James Cook, him sort of like, he was the Pluto in Libra individual, but he still, made the contact with Hawaii. There was also George Vancouver, who explored the world during the Vancouver expedition. He had Pluto in Sagittarius, and that was between 1791 and 1795. He traveled across lots of, kind of covered a lot of ground. There were really interesting financial reforms happening at the time in Japan by Matsudaira Sadanobu. I might be messing it up completely, but he was the Pluto and Sagittarius individual, and he sort of saw what needed to change. And he, in a very Sagittarian way, how can we make the world better? I think the first example is Sagittarian Adventure, right? The Vancouver guy going on the expedition. Here we have like the more fair Jupiterian vision of the world with Japanese financial reforms. There was also a Chechen warrior, Imam Sheikh Mansour, who's actually quite like, I don't know much about him, but he's apparently still like, he still holds like high respect in Chechnya because he was very like important in terms of separating from Russia, and he like led a coalition of Muslim Caucasian tribes. So, and the one last, Pluto and Sagittarius. Like I said, Pluto and Sagittarius, even what you said, they were thriving, right? They were sort of like making all these discoveries and traveling and kind of initiating reforms. So it's pretty exciting for our Gen Z generation. But Edward Jenner administered the first smallpox vaccination, and before then, smallpox killed an estimated 400,000 Europeans each year during the 18th century. So, like, how huge is that in general? And for Edward Jenner, it was probably really good for him, I would think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Major. Yeah. Wow. I love that you're sharing these like major historical events. It's really good to ground the energy and it brings a whole other layer to it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to look at that. It was fun to like see what kind of people lived, because we might see similar things. I'd be curious to see what kind of traveling can happen at this time, or what kind of developments Pluto and Sagittarius people can come up with in terms of travel.
Yeah, Yasmina said there in the comments, I'm thinking, will Pluto and Sagittarius generation with Uranus and Gemini be explorers of space on a larger scale?
Oh,
Spatial?
that's a good one.
That is.
Yeah, because aren't they trying? Isn't there something about like building space to live on other planets because we're sort of giving up on ours? Hopefully not.
Yeah. And I suppose that the energies could support that. And wasn't Uranus discovered in when Pluto was in Aquarius last as well?
I think so.
So we could see
yeah,
we could see like major transformations and shifts to do with astrology itself. That could very much change, and maybe because of that, how we as astrologers, how we communicate it could change.
For sure.
Yeah.
New ways of doing old things, I guess. So Pluto and Capricorn, our babies, our youngest generation alive. So Pluto and Capricorn is the generation that's labeled Generation Alpha, I think is the name right now. And that is the generation born between 2008 and all the way into 2024. Pluto is in Capricorn until January this year, and then between September 1st, November 19th. So if you're pregnant right now, you're expecting your baby to be born between September and November, you might get the final drops of Pluto. you might get that. So these are the children, right, who have lived through the COVID pandemic, who lived through recession, were born during recession in the US, and perhaps have experienced the shadow side of the power, but I think have also seen the power as like, sort of, like kind of they will have the knowledge of like corruption and capitalism and like people sort of controlling power, sort of grasping onto power. It's also, I think, like during this time, there was also like Occupy Wall Street movement and WikiLeaks and Brexit, and the first Black president was elected in the US. So there was a lot of sort of developments around power. The Pluto and Aquarius energy, I think, will be very different to what they're used to, because at this point they only kind of know what Pluto and Capricorn is like, and it will be important for their maturity on a lot of levels. It's going to introduce, I think on some level, there might be a difficulty there, because like considering that they're like really young right now, and Pluto and Aquarius might bring a lot more technology, a lot more sort of kind of separation on some level, but also maybe connection through social media. There might be a lot of access to information, a lot of things sort of available at their fingertips. So I think the question of boundaries will probably need to be addressed quite a lot in terms of, their parents, separating what they have access to versus what they need to have access to, like needing to sort of, and even maybe them themselves learning to have better boundaries, because at that point, Pluto stays in Aquarius for 20 years. They're not going to be children at that point anymore. But I think it could be eye-opening on many levels, because Saturn in Aquarius thinks outside the box versus Saturn in Capricorn thinks kind of, and that's, I think, quite like it makes a lot of sense with the period that they're going through, right? Like if you are born in 2008, you're only 16 right now. So you're like really, really young. So Pluto in Aquarius will probably introduce you to new people, to new ideas, to new possibilities. And it will be quite exciting. Like you might experience big friendship changes. You might connect with a whole like kind of unique people, explore unique ideas, be the person who actually maybe even uses that Capricorn structure of Pluto and Capricorn to go out there and like come up with a brand new idea and like bring it to fruition. The lady that I mentioned, Anne Radcliffe, who published her Mysteries of Adolfo novel, she was born with Pluto in Capricorn. That happened in 1794, and she was actually like born with Pluto in Capricorn, but she was, and I think makes so much sense, she was a pioneer of Gothic fiction. How Capricorn, she was sort of like, and Saturn, right, like Saturnian, even Aquarius, sort of like dark, talking about supernatural elements, which I think is like using kind of wordsmithing, writing a novel, taking time to perfect something, and then talking about like supernatural elements and being like the first, like, I don't know if she was the first woman to do it, but she definitely was like a pioneer in that regard. So maybe she was the first one. And she made, I think, the most money ever at that point as an author, because the average was like 10 pounds and she got 500 pounds. So it was like a big success.
Wow. Very Pluto and Capricorn.
Very
Turn a profit, get more money.
Right. Yeah. So sort of like not only exploring new things, but exploring questions of like, how can I make more money with all of this technology that's happening right now?
Yeah.
Do you have things to add?
Yeah, I guess Pluto and Capricorn, they're going to be the the next big leaders, and these possible like entrepreneurs. I feel as if Pluto in Aquarius is going to be a time where upskilling is necessary for people, and I think that this is a generation that is going to say, okay, this is what I need to do in order to be successful within whatever the future is, whatever that looks like, to to be successful, to survive, to provide for yourself, to provide for your family. I feel like this is a generation that is going to be able to pick up on those necessary skills quite well. The only thing I would say with this generation, though, I feel is just the pressure that could very well be on them, because I sort of think of what they are already being born into right now, and there could already be such harsh limitations for them, especially thinking about those who were born during lockdown times, and you kind of see that with the social isolation and how that could have affected babies born during that time. And so we could start very well see, like, thinking about Pluto, Saturn, karma, the effects of that. And maybe Pluto in Aquarius is it's going to showcase those results, and perhaps as well just with the financial difficulties and issues, like thinking about when Pluto first entered Capricorn, which was in 2008, the financial crisis with mortgages and everything, the banking collapsing, and also just seeing the effects as well, as you were saying there as well, Anastasia. If you were born in 2008, you're going to be 16 now. So I've kind of, what I've observed in this is a lot of people are just fed up with the workload and with the expectations and what it does it mean to be successful, kind of going back to how Pluto and Capricorn can look at the destruction of what success actually means and what is traditional as well, that sort of traditional path. So it could be quite a tricky one, perhaps, not just for this generation, but even for the previous generations. But it could be a tricky one because it's sort of like, well, what are the structures? What are the limits here? And where am I maybe being held back? There can be maybe a bit of like unfairness in that, or feeling quite sad, because with Saturn energy, Capricorn energy, it's all about setbacks, isn't it? Setbacks, delays. And so I feel like this is a generation that's going to have to kind of say, right, I was born into this, set of circumstances, but this is what I need to do to, work within it, or to improve my life, or whatever have you. But there can still be those more challenging themes, like, I'm depressed, or I'm feeling really low. And that's a big thing with Pluto and Capricorn. We've noticed that more and more people becoming depressed and anxious, and really worried about the future, because it's like there's not a lot of security basically in people's futures, and it's like, what the flip are we supposed to do? And things are so divided in that way today. So maybe these things are going to amplify.
Yeah, I'm curious about like mental health and how mental health will change, right? And like maybe Pluto and Capricorn will innovate it and come up with some kind of new ways of dealing with mental health. Yeah. This is, I think, like, there's always shadows, but I feel like people ask me sometimes, maybe you too, I think we get interesting questions as astrologers. They're like, when will Pluto leave me alone? And I'm always like thinking, like, you don't want it to leave you alone. You want to keep living, and you want to keep asking questions, because, leaves you alone when you're dead.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, you just gotta keep at it with Pluto. And the thing with Pluto is there is still the transformation. You can rise like the phoenix. You can, you learn a lot about your own resilience and about your own personal power to overcome. And with Pluto and Capricorn especially, there's so much about overcoming adversity. And yeah, maybe as you were saying there, Pluto and Aquarius, it's like, okay, maybe there'll be greater innovation for many people. So there's always hope. Like Aquarius energy, I feel, is like there's hope. There's hope.
For sure.
Yeah.
And like we all have multiple planets, multiple angles in our chart. So even if we're talking about, you have Pluto and Scorpio, and it may be more difficult for you, but you probably have other planets that Pluto will be aspecting in harmonious ways. So I wouldn't just worry about it. And Pluto is about, like, I think, you can see Pluto as like dealing, or like Aquarius being the sign of like outsiders and kind of feeling isolated or dealing with a lot of heavy questions. But you can also maybe find your community of outcasts and create like a tribe of people who are connected to you and who feel your pain. So hopefully Pluto and Aquarius will encourage us also to connect in new ways.
I love that.
Do you have anything to promote? What's going on in your astrology world?
So I have a Patreon. Okay, you can join my Patreon for daily forecasts. Okay, to keep yourself updated with what's going on a daily basis. And also, I do create YouTube videos, of course, and there are guides available over on Patreon to go with the YouTube videos, because some people like to read. There's different people have ways of learning, so there's some fun learning tools over there, and there's some behind the scenes footage which you can also access over at Patreon. But yeah, follow the Patreon if you want more astrology.
How to find your Patreon?
Yeah, so just go to patreon.com/Hannah's Elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah. And what about you, Anastasia? Anything to promote in your world?
I like how it's like your Virgo rising is so strong. Like the ruler is Mercury in the 6th house. You're like, there's also guides. There's also written stuff. She's like, I have thought of everything. I am currently running a 2024 year ahead special, so people can get a discounted price for the 2024 readings. They can save $20. So my website is anastasiadoesastrology.com for those who don't know. And you can save $20 on the year ahead if you want to talk to me in person. The coupon code is 2024, 24 numbers, 20 is the letters. People can save $40 by getting a recorded reading, and that is in the shop section of my website. The price is already built in. And I also I created my first ever astrology planner last year, so people can still pick it up. It's on my website, and I've been writing stuff in it
It's
already.
beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. So those are the two main things, I guess.
Awesome. Definitely make sure to check out Anastasia's work. Even follow Anastasia on Instagram. There's a lot of great posts that Anastasia shares over there.
And same
And
for
yeah.
Hannah. Yeah. I refer to your page a lot sometimes. I'm like, what did she say about this? I'm curious. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you for watching. Thank you
Yes.
for being here, you guys.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, we hope you've enjoyed it. We hope that you find it to be helpful. Okay? Virgo was like, it needs to be helpful. Okay. And
For sure.
yeah, we will talk to you all soon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.